So I just want to give you a quick look at working with what are called fluid grid layouts in Dreamweaver CC, the Creative Cloud version. And you can kind of do this in CS6 too. It's just there's more features in CC, I guess you can say. It's a little bit better. But we can create this really ugly site, and I know it's ugly, but look at it, it's responsive. You can create this visually pretty quickly, pretty easily. And it's using a lot of the same stuff that we would do. So how do I do it? Well, I'm going to show you the basic features. We're not going to build that whole thing. But if you're in Dreamweaver, if I come under File, New, you'll see that we have the Fluid Grid Layout category. Now, it's broken down into 3 main devices, and you can add more if you want to dig into the code, but you got a mobile layout, a tablet layout, and a desktop layout. It's going to come across different columns if you want to change that. These are basically just for design. And you can come in and change the overall width of these if you want to. So if you want a little more breathing room on the edges, let's say, you can change the sizes of these. It's going to create an HTML5 page, which is great. I'll click Create. It's going to ask me to save the CSS somewhere. I'll just slap it on my desktop and call it main. And click Save. And it creates the page. Now what's interesting about this is it's actually using, it's kind of cool. Let me scroll up a little bit here. It's using a boilerplate called the HTML5 boilerplate, which a lot of us will actually use. It's sort of like a template you can start with. When you create this, you're creating an HTML page that I can then go save. So let me do that real quick. I'll just do save. I'll call it like index.html and probably put it in the same spot that my CSS file is. And I probably should put it in a folder, but I'm lazy. I'll click save. What it's going to do is copy a couple files, a boilerplate CSS and a respond.js. They're going to help this to work. Now, boilerplate CSS, that's the HTML5 boilerplate I was talking about. This is kind of like a starting point for your layout to help all the different browsers to get it to work. And respond is going to have the HTML5 tags that we use, kind of kick Internet Explorer in the butt to get it to work. I'll click OK. All right. Well, there we go. There's our layout. Now what we can do is we can start to design this thing. So let's talk quickly about this. I'll click on Design so we can see the whole thing. Down here, you're going to see that we have 3 different views, you can call them. We've got mobile, we've got tablet, and we've got desktop. Basically, the way it works is you're creating one HTML file, and you're creating one CSS file, one style sheet file, if you will. But in the style sheet file, we're using what are called breakpoints or media queries. Breakpoint's kind of the generic name. If I go to main CSS here and take a look, and then go to code only, just so you can see the code, I'll scroll up and you'll see these things right here. This is a media query. It's saying, hey, if a viewport or a device or whatever you want to call it has a minimum width of this, then use the formatting below it. It's basically between these little braces here. The way the code works is all the code at the top of the style sheet is applied to every device. As it goes down here, you're going to see that we get a media query. Devices that are at least this big, at least the viewport is at least this big, all the styling below it is going to apply. So it's going to apply everything above it plus this to a 481 pix viewport and larger. And then as it goes on, it's going to say, oh, well, if you're this large, and let's say it's, for instance, it's desktop, okay, it's going to apply everything above it plus this styling. So it kind of cascades, okay? I'll go back to design. Now, if we want to start designing this, we want to start add content, you're going to see right here that we actually have a containing div that you don't want to mess with. This thing right here, it's called the grid container. Everything that's going to be part of the fluid grid needs to be in that. And what they do to start with is they throw a div out here that I never use. So what I'm going to do is just delete this thing. If you click inside these, you'll see this little HUD right here. And you can just click on the delete to get rid of it. I'm going to use HTML tags. You'll see my cursor's still in there. This is just a div. If I come over to the right in the insert panel, I can go to structure and you'll see header. Here's all the HTML5 tags we can use. So I'll choose header. Now when you insert something in here that's going to be what's called a fluid element, it's going to ask you to put a class on it. And I understand why Dreamweaver is doing this, but I kind of don't understand. Anyway, so to say class, you can also make an ID if you want. Make sure that this is selected because that means it's going to make it play nice. Click OK. And we've got our header. Now we're going to add navigation. We can go in and add our stuff there. Come to the right over here. I'm going to click. This is where it's going to get kind of interesting. You can use your right arrow key if you want. You can also click just outside the header here, but still inside that box. So right there. Then we're going to insert a navigation. Look over here, you're going to see navigation. Click navigation. Let's make a class. I'll just call it nav list or something like that. And you can come up with simple class names. Fluid element. Click OK. Beautiful. Now I'm going to throw an actual navigation in there that we're going to create from a bullet list or an unordered list. So we'll select the content in there, get rid of it. That's fine. Come over here. You're going to see unordered list. I'll click on that. Now what's interesting is, let me do this real quick. I'll just do nav list. You're just coming up with class names that make sense to you later on. Click OK. You're going to see over here that's going to show you the code. Now I want to go to the source code here to show you this. Click on that. And if I put my cursor in here, you'll see it's going to show me, oh, well, here's the UL. I'll make sure my cursor's in there. We're now going to start to add list items. So if I come over here to list item and click on the first one, it's going to add one, and I'll just call this, I don't know, list item, whatever. You do what you want. Click OK. And it'll tell you if you try a name that doesn't work properly. Now you notice that we're adding all this stuff. We're adding these tags and these HTML5 tags and these regular old HTML tags. And if I click down here to view the different designs, tablet, mobile, and desktop, all this stuff's showing up in every single one because we're creating one single HTML5 or one single HTML file rather. We're just using different styling for each we'll get to. I'll click back on design. Now I'm going to add another list item. So with my cursor in there, you can duplicate just about anything out here, any fluid element. So I'll click duplicate. And maybe I want 4 of these things. So I'll click duplicate. And then I can come in here and just start changing the content. And I'll say like about us, contact us, something, something, products, services, there's tons of ways you can do this. Okay. All right, so I'll type in services, there we go. Now when you click inside of these, you'll see that we get all these options out here. We also get these little arrows which allow you to just kind of swap different elements up and down. It just kind of moves them up and down, if you will. So there we go. Now what I want to do is I want to change how these look. If I come to the mobile design, you'll see that in mobile sites, we typically want to keep them stacked like this in a single column. It's great. Here's where it gets a little different. Once we start adding this stuff, it's great. But once we start doing things like changing the size, the position, things like that, different properties about these, you've got to be in the right design. So I don't want the phone to change. What I want the tablet to look different. So if I click on the tablet size, I'm going to come in here and click on, let's say, the first one and change the size. To resize an element, a fluid element, you come to the right and there's this little box. On the left side, there's this little guy right here. You don't want to do that. That's going to apply margin usually. So I come to the right and drag to resize, and I'll say, 2 columns maybe. Now you'll notice it all changing here because they're basically all using the same style. Now what I want to do is I want to take this one right here, products, and I want it to go up and float next to about us. You're going to see this little arrow here which says move it up. Now because the styling is applied to all of these, the same style, watch what happens when I click move up. Bam. They all move up. So they're all what are called floating. Now you'll notice that there's a little gap between each one and they're not fitting. That's pretty much because each one has a little bit of margin to the left. I want to get rid of the margin on the first one. So if I click on About Us here, you'll see that we get this little apply zero margin, meaning get rid of the margin. I'll click on that, and there we go. It should fit pretty well. Now you can always come in and try and adjust a little bit the sizing, but just know it's going to do it for each one. Now I'm going to add another div out here that's going to contain maybe quotes or something like that. And this is not going to show up in every design, meaning on my mobile device, I don't want it to show up. So I'll show you how to do that. So once again, I want to add another one of these. I'll click to the right here, just inside of the containing div, and we're going to add a div. So I'll click on div in the insert panel, and we'll put a class on this. We'll just call it like quotes or something. Keep it simple. Click OK, and there we go. Now it's going to show up if I click on each one of the designs here. I've got mobile. You're going to see there it is. I've got tablet and I've got desktop. It's showing up in each one. Now we'll get to this. Don't worry. It's kind of a surprise, but I'm going to go back to mobile here and suppose that I don't want the quotes to show up. Well, if I go to a certain layout and there's something out there, some kind of fluid element I don't want, you're going to see right here, hide it. So if I click hide, for this design only, it's going to hide that. If I go back to tablet, there it is right there. Go back to desktop, there it is right there. It's kind of cool. So that way you can kind of go in and say, I don't want it here, I want it here. Now you'll notice that in the header, in the desktop view rather, when we went and floated those elements, it didn't change the desktop one either. This is what's kind of interesting, and working with this stuff, you got to get used to it. But when you do things like sizing, the floating, the margin, it only affects the layout you're showing at that moment. So in the desktop version, what I'd like to do is kind of the same thing. I click on About Us, I'll grab the right here to resize. And in this case, I'm going to say 3 columns. I'll float them. There we go. And I'll just come out here and say for the first one, let's get rid of the margin. And there we have it. All right, now it's going to look a little better out there. Don't worry, spacing looks a little odd right now, but it should work out. Okay, now suppose that I want to do this. Suppose I want to put a slideshow out here that is all the way across, meaning it goes from edge to edge. Right now, the designs, if I click on, let's say, desktop or mobile right here, that percentage, there was a percentage that we set that means that it's going to have a little gap on the edge. That's usually a good thing. You don't want your text to go all the way to the edge. But I want to put something outside of the design. So we're going to have a slideshow. Then we're going to put some columns and a footer. So to do that, what I can do is click outside. I'll click like out here. And you'll see that it's hopefully going to put your cursor out there. What you can do is you can also click on the actual container here, the container element. I'll go add a div. Click on div. And I'm going to call this one slideshow. Now, it doesn't have to be a slideshow. You can actually insert an image directly in there, and it'll do kind of the same thing. I don't want this to be a fluid element. That basically means that I'm going to control it. This is going to be a little bit harder because I have to then go get the style created, kind of figure out how it works, etc., etc. If I click OK, you'll see what it does. It kind of sticks it outside of that container div. So it kind of lives on its own. Now, if I want to, I can go in and add a slideshow, add text, add whatever I want, and it will always go edge to edge. Now, what if I want to do this? What if I'm like, okay, well, I want to create another couple columns and footer that do this. They're actually contained within a little div. Well, I can just copy paste this one. So I'll copy this one by clicking on the edge. I'll go to Edit, Copy. And then I'll come down here and put my cursor down here. Now, you got to be careful with this. A lot of times what I wind up doing is I go to Split View, Source Code. Make sure that my cursor is after this div. I'll actually look in the code and make sure it's after the div, like right there. And then I'll go to Edit, Paste. And now, see, I clicked on the code. You got to be careful. I don't want to do that. I'm going to go to Edit, Undo. Got to make sure you're out here in Design. Okay, just make sure the cursor's in there. And I'll go to Edit, Paste. And there we go. Click on Design. And now what I could do is I can go out and say, hey, I don't want this header here. I want to put columns. So I can start deleting the things I don't need. So I don't want that. I don't want the list. Gone. Now, this is really weird, but that grid is still there. It just collapsed. I'm now going to add a couple columns. So come over here, right? You can use your HTML5 tags if you want to, like aside and section and different things like that. But I'm just going to throw a couple divs out here. So I'll click on div. And I'm going to say insert it as a fluid element. You got to always check this. That means it's going to keep it within that container. I'll put a class, I'll call it Cal1. Click OK. There we go. Now I could duplicate this, but I don't want to do that because I want to make two columns that are different sizes, different widths. So I'll put my cursor after this one, insert another div, call it Cal2. Click OK. And then I'll throw a footer out there. Put my cursor right after, but inside the container. The footer, HTML5 tags right there. Put a footer class on it. You guys can always pause the video. I know I'm going a little fast here, but click OK. Now I can go create my columns. So I'll click in column 1, always dragging from the right here to resize. I'll say, oh, I want this one to be, yay wide, etc. Now I got to be careful here because I'm looking at this going, this is kind of a small area. I look down here and I'm like, oh, well, I'm in mobile view. Things should be in a single column, straight up like this. I don't want to have columns dividing usually. So what I'm going to do is go over to tablet. You can see I got my columns here. Now, for some reason, there's an errant quotes down there. I'm not sure why that's actually showing up down there. That should not be there. All right, I'm going to get rid of it. I'll delete it. Oops, hit delete. There we go. Now I'll come to column here. I'm in the tablet view, and I'll say, hey, I want this column to be this wide. Click on the next one, say this column's going to take up the rest of the space, which is going to be 3. And then I want to move it up. So you always take the element, the fluid element you want to move up, and do it by moving up a row. And there we go. Now I can go in and start, adding content, doing different things. Start doing things like this. And I've got my layout started. Now I can go to desktop and do pretty much the same thing. You're going to notice the content's there, but I need to go into each one of the columns and make the size differences here and say, I want it to be this, that, etc. Move it up, and there we go. That way, if I go to mobile, you'll see you got footer, the layout, all this different content. By the way, these gaps right here are caused by the paragraphs that have margin around them. That's a pretty typical HTML, CSS thing rather. And then go to each one. Now, one of the interesting things about doing this is you'll notice I got my layout pretty much set. I can start to add my content, my design, different things like that. But check this out. This is kind of interesting. I'm going to go back to mobile. And let's suppose that in my header up here, I want to add a color, okay, like a background color. Well, now that we create all this content, we can go over to CSS, the CSS designer. Let me open this thing up, and we can start to edit. You'll see that we've got what are called our sources here. These are all of our style sheets. When we do this kind of liquid layout, we're usually going to be using our main style sheet. We're not going to touch this boilerplate usually. You'll also notice down here that we have what's called media. Now I can change the size here. Media, these are called the media queries we talked about a little bit. Down here, you're going to see the selectors. This is what we want. So the top one is the last one applied. This is the header style we created. So if I click on header, you're going to see the different properties we have over here. I come to background and scroll up, you're going to see the background color here. I'm just going to make some random wacky color. Make it like a blue. Awesome. Now I'll just go out here and hit some returns just so we can see it. Now check this out. This is kind of interesting. If I go to tablet now, look what I get, and then desktop. You'll start to see that some of the formatting you do to these fluid elements, once you start getting into the actual design of things, when you do it to the mobile version, it's going to apply to all 3 layouts. If I were to do something to tablet, watch this. I'll go to tablet and go to quotes here, and I'll click on quotes to select it. You'll see I have my quotes. Now it's got 2 styles here. This is kind of interesting, but the bottom style is the style that's coming from the mobile version. The top one is the last style applied, which is tablet. I'll go to desktop, go to background, and change the color. I'll do something crazy here so you can see it. There's a green, awesome, and then hit a return maybe. Look what happens when I go to desktop. There it is, but look what happens when I go to mobile. Not there. As you start to design and add design elements, features, colors, rounded corners, whatever, that kind of stuff, you'll see that it starts kind of rolling downhill. Okay, it's something to get used to. But anyway, I intended this to be quicker, but this is just getting started with the fluid grid layouts in Dreamweaver.